You're listening to the Bourbon Nerds Podcast, Bourbon Nerd Spotlight, featuring Randall Sullivan, episode The Goat. I'm Cody.
I'm Garrett.
And we are the Bourbon Nerds.
We're here with Randall Sullivan today. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. I know we've talked about this. I mean, we came, what was it, November last year? We came to your house and you kind of gave us some advice and kind of put us under your wing a little bit, which we greatly appreciated you doing that and drank some bourbon with you. But
we are like 20 something episodes later and finally getting you on.
And we're still alive.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I host an event at my house about every 5 or 6 weeks, or at least I try to. Lately, I've been a little too busy for that, but it's come one, come all. But you don't find out about it unless you're on Facebook and you're a member of my whiskey club, Someone Say Whiskey. And I just bring in usually between 35 and 50 people, give everybody free food, free whiskey glass, and cut them loose on the whiskey wall and let them drink whatever they want. But there is a disadvantage of that because I also go to all of our single barrel releases. I have Patreon events. I have events where, there's live in-person events. And so I'm pretty good at remembering faces, but not always like where I met the person.
Yeah.
And so someone's like, I was at your house with you for 5 hours. I literally made an absolute horse's ass of myself recently in Kentucky. I was at the Neat Bourbon Bar with Owen, who was the creator of the bourbon secondary market. Now he owns a legitimate vintage whiskey bar where you can order by the glass. And a group of people came in. I had 7 people there from Dallas, 7 people there from Houston, and 7 people walk in, and I recognize them all. They're all from Alaska. And I spent some time in Alaska late last year promoting my brand, the Prideful Goat. And there was a gentleman there that I got confused with someone who actually came from Alaska to my house. And I started to explain to the Dallas people the relationship that my brand has with their main liquor store and how there's some controversy in the whiskey enthusiast world. And this one guy starts going that's not how it is. Mm-hmm. And I was like, don't you work there part-time? And he's like, yeah, part-time. And it was about that time that I realized that I'm talking to the person who is the most powerful person in spirits in the state of Alaska.
Oh, wow.
I had met him before, and I totally got his face confused with somebody else's, and then started to tell him about his liquor store that he is the czar of.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I bet that went really well with him.
Yeah. No, he was so gracious about it. But I do have that problem that I am so free with inviting people over the house and hanging out with people everywhere I go, that I remember faces, but not always all the details.
I'm always bad with names myself. But that's the cool thing about whiskey, though, is it's a very social thing, and everyone's very generous. I love this, this whole thing that bourbon's brought. I love the Someone Say Whiskey group. It's always fun to get together in events and just hang out and drink. It's a very social.
Yeah, and share something you're passionate about. I mean, I've met so many amazing people in the Someone Say Whiskey community. We got to meet you. That's why we drink and enjoy and share and, help others when they need. You guys do a great job, when somebody's in need and, people donate money.
Yeah, that raffle was insane.
Yeah, the raffle was
Gary
awesome.
Morris, that was awesome.
I mean, there's been tons of different things, some of which we'll talk about in a little bit. You've got some great charitable events that you guys host on. You got the Freddie event coming up in June, which we're super excited about. So let's go ahead and dive in. We wanted to kind of start, how did you get into whiskey? I'm kind of curious about your journey. I know we talked a little bit when we came to your house the first time, but wanted to share that with kind of your story with our audience.
Yeah, I didn't really drink till I was about 28 years old, roughly. When I turned 21, I bought a couple of bottles of wine, but I don't even think I ever finished them.
I think it's just kind of a thing. You just go out and buy them.
Yeah. I just wanted to exercise my right, and I was married at that point. I got married when I was 20. And my wife and I got real involved with the youth at church, and so drinking just wasn't really a big part of our life. Yeah. And it wasn't until I was about 28, and I had my first kid, and we were going on a trip with another couple to Las Vegas, and they would have a drink with dinner and all that stuff. And I got real curious, and I was like, I don't even know if I like alcohol or, and so I was just ordering something different everywhere I went. And then not too long after that, for my birthday, we went to a steak restaurant, and when I went to order wine with my steak, the server, like, when the pitcher waves off a call, right? It was like that. Like, I was like, I'd like this wine, and the waiter looked at me and like kind of shook his head, like, no, you don't want that,
Not here, not up in my house.
And I felt so inept that I asked Lindsay for a book, and she got me a book, and I read it. And I started to realize that alcohol is very culturally significant, historically significant. It plays a much larger role than I realized in society. Mm. And because I'm such a nerd for history and things like that, I just kind of dove into wine. And my problem with wine was, there were bottles that I had hunted for a long time, and it took me a long time to get a hold of them. Like, I had a 1983 Chateau Petrus, and I opened it up with a buddy of mine, and it was gone in like 30 minutes, right? And, there's only like 4.5 glasses of wine in a bottle, and it's not super shareable because when you open it, you got to drink it. Yeah. And I was at a buddy's house, and he had, I think, 6 different bourbons that he had out on the table. And I'd never been in an environment before where I got the chance to sample from different bottles side by side. And that's when I started to realize, oh my God, like, there's actually a lot of variability in the flavors of bourbons. Mm-hmm. Yep. In fact, it's not dissimilar to the tasting notes that you could give for wine. And I started doing research and learned, like, oh, okay, well, you could get this. You could keep it for years. You could share small pours at a time. Mm-hmm. It's more of a social drink than wine. And I completely switched my allegiance over and went full bore into whiskey.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. That's awesome. That's a good story. You want to talk a little bit about the Prideful Goat, the 15, you're right. This is one that we're drinking now, which is delicious. I wish I could find a bottle of this, but talk a little bit, talk about your brand. I mean, you coming out with, I know Garrett fell in love with a 12-year, like as soon as we had it at the Whiskey Riot.
I've been drinking the crap out of it. Yeah, I've been drinking every Stars game, hopefully get some Stars
get some luck.
In a couple games it was good, and this last one I'm like, oh, nope, got to switch it up, I guess, because they were horrible the other night.
Oh, no. That wasn't the whiskey's fault. The whiskey brings all of the luck.
I think I got to it too late. I think
that's a problem. Yeah, you got to start drinking earlier in the day. That's the issue. No. So I did have the fortune to be able to create my own brand in partnership with a distillery. There was actually a Texas Whiskey Association podcasting event that was down in Houston. I went down there. I met this really interesting gentleman, Carlos de Aldecoa. You don't know him, but you do, because he imports between 30 and 40% of the coffee into the United States.
Oh, wow.
So he's third generation international coffee baron is the best way that I could describe what his core business is. He also owns a sugar processing plant and produces 97% of the organic sugar in the United States. And he also has a decaffeination plant that provides all the caffeine for Coca-Cola products in the U.S.
Wow.
For all of you soda drinkers out there, Coca-Cola is the only one using natural caffeine. Everybody else is using synthetic, from what I've been told. So anyway, I meet this gentleman. He's really interesting individual. He's like really good looking. He's got like this thick Spanish accent. He's just got like this, it brings the vibes, you know, like
Antonio Banderas.
Yeah, a little shorter, but yes. And so I'm at this event and I get introduced to him, but by name, right? And I had heard the story about this distillery, and this distillery was built inside an Uncle Ben's rice processing plant that was built in a public-private partnership between the U.S. government and private business interest, so that they could produce rice for the Allied forces during World War II.
Oh, okay, nice.
So this building was built like back in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And eventually Uncle Ben's ended up shutting down that plant, and it came up for sale. And this gentleman, Carlos, was in college at the time, And he went to his dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I found this really awesome piece of industrial property. I want to buy it." And his dad said, "Well, we'll loan you the money, but you have to pay the family business back in 18 months. And if you don't, then it's going to become a family asset. You don't get to keep it." And so he bought it, and he sold off pieces of rice processing equipment to different companies all around the world, Pretty Woman style, just like Richard Gere would buy a company and sell its parts off. And he ended up paying off the debt, and he owned the building and the property outright in college. And he used that as this jumping off point. He started his coffee company, which is called Codeco. And then later he started Giant Texas Distillers, which is they make Giant Texas bourbon, BJ Hooker's vodka. They have some gin brands, so on. And so I had heard this story, but I didn't know what the gentleman looked like. So I'm standing there, I get introduced. I start to notice the staff are being a little bit different around this guy. And am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. This story's going to be way cooler with cuss words. And so I'm like, "Hey, like, are you the owner?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, family business." He's trying to play it cool. And he says, I said, "Man, this place is amazing. I didn't know there was a distillery this big in Texas." And he's like, "Have you never been here before?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Let me take you on a tour." Now, I don't know if you gentlemen have logged the moments in your life when you were the coolest that you will ever be. Okay?
I don't know.
But this is the second coolest moment of my entire life. So I tell him I had been on a tour. He says, "Well, let me take you on a private tour." He says to the guy behind the bar, "Hey, get Randy a pour of that 15-year Kentucky straight bourbon that we just got in.
Wow.
I'm going to take him on a tour." And then another gentleman that's standing next to him that also works for him goes, "Oh, you're going on a tour?" And Carlos goes, "Yeah, I'm just show Randy around." And the guy goes, "Hey, do you see those two ladies that are sitting at the bar?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "They've been waiting to go on a tour. Can you take them with you?" And Carlos looked at him and he goes, "No, that's your job. Come on, Randy." And I was like, why is this guy being so nice to me?
Yeah. What did I do?
So we go on a tour, and he takes me, and he's like, "I'm going to show you some stuff that people don't normally see." And he takes me back to this back building. And, if you've ever toured like a really large production facility, you can tell how big they are based on how big their fermentation tanks are, because they got to feed those stills, right? And he has 6 40,000-gallon fermentation tanks inside of one of his buildings. It's
Holy cow.
enormous. And we're standing in there, and he points, and he goes, "Do you see that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And it's a column still, but it's still in parts. It's like not all put together. And he says, "Oh, those are the Maker's Mark column stills." And I said, "Hey, I heard a rumor that Maker's Mark threatened to sue you for telling people that." And he goes, "Oh, they did." And I go, "And you're still telling people?" And because Maker's Mark sues everyone.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Do you know who Dave Pickerel is?" And Dave Pickerel was the master distiller at Maker's Mark. He left, and he's most famous for being the impetus behind Whistle Pig.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
And unfortunately, he died unexpectedly. And so he goes, "Did you know that Dave passed away unexpectedly?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Well, he and I were very good friends, and he was my consultant too. He helped me start this place, and he's the one that put me in contact with the broker for me to buy this stuff. But when he passed away, his family was not really prepared for his passing. And I gave them the money to trademark his name. And then I bought the trademark from them. So I own the rights to Dave Pickerel's name. So when Maker's Mark sent me a cease and desist and threatened to sue me, I had my attorney send them a letter back that said, "I own the name of Dave Pickerel, who used to use these stills, and I'll say whatever the fuck I want."
Mic drop. That's all.
And right then I was like,
This guy's
I'm
legit.
not gay, I think. But I'm in love with this man.
Yeah.
And so we were drinking the 15-year that we're all drinking right now. And I asked him for a single barrel for my club, and he said yes. And then I reached out to some of my other club friends and said, "Hey, y'all want to get a single barrel this 15-year. I won't say in recording where it's from, but it was from a distillery that was like, oh my God, like there's no other way to get this kind of whiskey. This is an amazing opportunity. And everybody wanted one.
Yeah.
And then we found out that when they bought it, the distillery had dumped it into shipping containers because they didn't want their barrels with their barrel heads in someone else's warehouse.
Oh, okay.
Which is also why there's a non-disclosure. And so they, the totes were 330 gallons, which is about 1,300 bottles of whiskey. So when you do a single barrel, especially something like 15 years old, you wouldn't expect but 130 bottles.
Yeah.
At most, right? I was not prepared to move 1,300 bottles.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I called one of my buddies who I'd also tried to set up to get the barrel, who ran Houston Bourbon Society, Christopher Hart. He had his own podcast at the time called Whiskey Neat. And he was like, hey, what if we created a separate label for this release and just did a statewide thing?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Can you do that? And he's like, well, if Carlos will let you. So I called Carlos, and he's a billionaire. So he's like, yeah, let's have fun. Go ahead. Here's my attorney's info. Don't name anything until we find out if we can trademark it. Those were our only instructions. And so
crazy.
I asked Christopher, because I'm not a creative person, and Christopher's super creative,
Yeah.
and he's really great at branding. And I asked Christopher, I was like, hey, what do you want? Like, what direction do you want to go? And he's like, I want the label to look like an old world Irish pub sign. So I start looking up all these Irish pub signs, and they're all in Gaelic.
Okay.
And so I start looking up what things mean in Gaelic, and I was like, I found the name. And it was his name, his last name, and my last name in Gaelic. And I don't even remember what it was, but it's not a language I speak.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's
I called
cool.
him, and I'm like, I found the name. And I say it, and he's like, it's cool. What is it? And I was like, it's your last name and my last name. And he goes, and he's real great at like giving negative feedback because he does it in that like he's going to say something nice and then he's going to say the truth and then say something nice again.
The sandwich effect.
The sandwich effect, you know. And he was like, that sounds awesome. Sounds like a great name. However, have you considered that when whiskey nerds find out we name this whiskey after ourselves, that they're going to fucking crucify us? And I was like, ooh, yeah,
that's a good
you're
point.
probably right. And then he blurts out, what about the Prideful Goat? And I was like, what about you've been playing on a hipster word generator? Like, what are you talking about? The Prideful Goat?
That's funny.
And so he swears to this day that it means nothing, that it just came to him in his imagination. But we had the goat designed first by a designer. And I dare to say that he's got a little pride in his eye.
Yeah.
When you look at it. And then we sent the goat to an actual whiskey label designer because there's so many intricate details that you have to comply with TTB that you don't want to have a design company that's not ever done a label before designing your label.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So that's kind of the origin story of the Prideful Goat.
No, that's awesome. That's a good story. I remember when we were at the Whiskey Ride event and we were talking about the 12-year, which you let us try the 15. I was like, oh my God, this is so good. And Garrett rushed out. I mean, you had said, I want a 12, where can you find a 12-year-old rye at around $50 that's on the shelf? And like, I can't think of another.
There's not one. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get reports about which stores have it, or I can get the reports, but I know they ordered it. I don't know if they still have it. And they tend to pull those whiskeys into the stores that are higher volume for whiskey. And so my guess is that the higher volume stores are getting it, but they're selling out.
Yeah, and that's what I figured.
And Sherman might have been on that list because they normally sell a lot of whiskey, but not this type of whiskey. So maybe that's why it's always there.
They don't have the other Prideful. They just have that 12-year.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting.
I'm cool with it because, I really like that one a lot.
Makes me so sad. I want all the stores to have all the SKUs.
Yeah. The 6-year and the 8-year cast strength. Hey, I think he found that one at Liquor. Was it Liquor
Yeah, the
King?
8-year.
Yeah, he finally found it at a Liquor King.
Yeah, it was a Liquor King. I found that. Yeah, I scooped that thing up.
But
I was been looking for that for a while.
They're all really great.
I had
stuff,
him on the podcast, so I guess he followed through with ordering my
Yeah,
products.
he did. Yeah, because I could not find that 8-year anyway. We stopped by. They had some other store picks and stuff, and I was like, oh, I've been looking for that Prideful Goat 8-year because I had Jamie's bar. I had the 6-year, and I'm like, this is.
I actually got it. Yeah, he actually got it before we even talked to you or something. So
Yeah.
we were really into it before.
Oh, nice.
Before we even knew you were part of it.
Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, I knew you were affiliated, but I didn't know it was like your brand or like y'all you have a partnership.
I mean, I own a tiny piece. The distillery owns the overwhelming majority of it, but I am the
Brand ambassador, kind of.
That's too small. I'm probably like the executive director. Like I decide what barrels to that we want to purchase. Of course, I have to get approval for everything.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
But I have literally sat down and said, I need $12 million. And Carlos said, when? And I said, by tomorrow at 5. And he's like, okay. That deal ended up falling apart because somebody had committed fraud and represented something.
Oh, wow.
And Carlos was too smart for them and put measures in place to protect himself. And once he figured it out, we killed the deal. But that's the thing. I get a lot of people that come up to me and say like, oh, I want to open my own, brand of whiskey. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm not even sure I did the right thing. And I have a business partner that when I need $12 million, he can find it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The whiskey industry is set up to make sure there are no new people coming to the table.
Yeah.
It is set up to make sure that all the big boys stay at the table and they keep their slice of pie. And it's next to impossible unless you're willing to risk tons of capital for something that may or may not work. It's very hard to break into the industry. But I've been lucky in that we've been able to find really solid whiskey at what I would consider a reasonable price given the market conditions when we purchase the barrels. And so I've never released anything that I wasn't, comfortable with the quality price ratio for the age statement versus what else was available on the market at that time. And I've had the opportunity to put my hands on a few things and influence, some of the releases that we've released, like the rum finished rye that we did in the 12-year. I was the one that got to do the blend on that. So
that's very good.
In front of us are these are the sample bottles that the distillery sends me barrel samples from. And they sent me a bunch of barrel samples, and these were the bottles that I literally set at this table with a graduated cylinder and created the blend that you are buying at Specs right now.
Awesome.
Oh, wow.
At this table.
That's crazy.
From those bottles.
That's insane. That's cool. How long did it take you to do that?
Oh, it wasn't long. Maybe hour and a half. Because, one of the things that you have to consider is yield.
Yeah.
Right. So it's one of the things that makes me kind of irritated as a podcaster because I know a little bit about how things work behind the scenes.
Yeah.
When certain brands make a really big deal about their blending, it's like, okay, but you don't taste every barrel that you buy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. The way they do their marketing, it sounds like, oh, I went to this rick house and I was crawling around for hours and trying different barrel samples and I bought all the special barrels and I put them together in just a special way and I was able to make this really special blend. And that's not true. You don't go to the rick house. A barrel broker calls you and goes, I have 500 barrels that are in 3 different lots. They were distilled and barreled on these dates. And this is how much it is per barrel. Do you want any?
Yeah.
Right. And you can ask for a sample, but, in times past when there was a barrel shortage, if you asked for a sample, by the time it got to you, all 500 barrels were gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Just flip them.
And well, I mean, that's their job. They are barrel brokers. They are finding people. And, it could be a little bit frustrating because I go, hey, I found 150 barrels of bourbon. This is its age. It's 21% rye from MGP. And, there's people that are on the finance team that are like, well, did you try it? And I go, did I try 21% rye bourbon from MGP? Yeah, every fucking day. from 20 different brands.
Yeah.
Do I need a sample of it to know whether or not this is going to be good whiskey? Absolutely not. Right. So that was kind of a learning curve that we all had to go through, where they'd go, well, get a sample and try it first. And I go, okay, but they're all going to be gone by the time the sample gets here.
Yeah.
And then I'd ask for the sample, and the barrel broker would be like, okay, buddy.
Send me that sample, please.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's it sounds. Obviously, there's a lot of work that goes behind all of that. And we talked to the owner of Hochatown, and he's going into all this different, laws and different, which Oklahoma is a lot different.
Than
They
Texas,
have a lot
yeah.
of stuff that they're battling because they're like one of the first kind of distilleries there.
Sure.
And so it's really interesting to hear like all the different aspects of like laws and labels and just all the different things you have to go through. So I can only imagine, trying to. And do you guys ever have intention of like making your own kind of juice or?
That's an excellent question. So when you're talking about a whiskey brand, the least committal level would be where we're at right now, which is we are a non-distiller producer. So we are buying whiskey that we had no influence over its production because it is somebody else's standard product that we are buying their surplus from them, right? And that's been MGP's business model for ever since they were sold by Seagram's. That's been their business model. The next level would be you are contract distilling, which means you might have influence over the production. But if you do, understand, you're going to have to invest money, and you probably can't recoup it for at least 4 years.
Yeah.
Right? And probably longer. So that's the next level. The next level after that would be something like a Rocktown distillery or a Chicken Cock, where they have their own team, they have their own mash bills, they have their own yeast, all that stuff, but they're going to go rent somebody else's facility, and they're going to produce whiskey on somebody else's still. And that's Bardstown Bourbon Company does that. That would be the next level. And again, you've got to wait 4 or 6 years or whatever before your whiskey's ready. And then the last would be your own production. So we obviously can spot buy, and we do, and all of our current products, that was the case. And of course, you can do finishing, you can rebarrel, you can double oak, you can do stuff to make it unique. And just aging it in Houston makes it taste different than the same liquid that Smoke Wagon's releasing, or Nulu, or Barrel Crest Spirits, or whoever, right? Because there's a lot of brands that bottle this whiskey. The aging environment doesn't make a huge difference. But Carlos, for a long time, has been contract distilling Kentucky straight bourbon in Kentucky. So there is a scenario, and that liquid's about 4 years old now, 4.5. So there is a scenario where, because I don't think I'll release a bourbon that's less than 6 years.
Yeah.
I would maybe do a rye that was less than 6 years, because in my opinion, rye matures faster.
Yeah.
Rye's a little more about the grain, a little bit less about the barrel than bourbon is.
Yeah.
So I would guess maybe 1.5 years, I'll start tasting those barrels and determine whether or not that contract distilled liquid, which we didn't make it, but we designed it, whether or not that'll go in a barrel. And in about 4 years from now, we will start to have bourbon that was distilled on the old Maker's Mark still that will be 6 years old. And there's a scenario where we could start bottling that for the Prideful Goat. But this was just a passion project. To be honest, I didn't even have any ownership interest for the first year after we released the first Prideful Goat whiskey. I only did it because it was cool.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't have any monetary connection to the brand. I was just thought, it was awesome to be able to bring something to Texas whiskey enthusiasts that was unique at a good price.
Yep.
And then after it went well, that's when Carlos said, like, hey, let's build this into a real brand. And I'm still curious whether or not saying yes was a good idea.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of work has gone into building the brand, and I'm sure traveling, all that other stuff.
And I know that's why distilleries do a lot of like vodka and gin and stuff, because that's kind of you can make it quick and you can start kind of making some money while your bourbon and stuff is aging. So you guys kind of have a different, where you guys already have kind of something going while you're kind of working on that in the background. So yeah,
there are only 3 paths to market. The first is try to pay your bills with vodka and gin, and maybe some contract distillation, right? Where you're making whiskey for someone else and you're getting paid up front, and then they're going to age it and sit on it. And then your second path is to sell somebody else's product, which can be a problem. It was a huge problem for Smooth Ambler because their Old Scout product was all high-aged MGP, and when that product disappeared and they started trying to transition, they went to Dickel for a little bit, and people that were used to their, high-aged MGP would open it up and be like, what the hell is this?
Flintstone vitamins, how dare you?
How dare you,
Totally different.
Yeah, huge difference.
And so, that was a big problem for Bell Mead. That was a big problem for Smooth Ambler. And that's the boat that I'm in. And then the third is to just be gangster and spend unbelievable sums of money, well north of $1 million. And that's where you are distilling your own product from the beginning, and you're waiting to age it until it tastes good.
Yeah.
And there's all this pressure on brands to release it at a younger age. A lot of people don't realize, but bourbon doesn't have an aging requirement. The only requirement for it to be bourbon is that it has to age in new charred oak. But it doesn't say for how long. And so, like Belfour Spirits, which was started by Eddie Belfour, the Hockey Hall of Famer, who brought the Stanley Cup to Dallas. He lives not too far from here. He and his family started a brand, and they contract distilled everything, custom mash bill, all that stuff. And they started releasing products that were as young as 18 months old because they were trying to generate some revenue.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the thing as a consumer. Like, when you understand the difficulty that these brands have to go through to bring you this product, have a little compassion and empathy, and if you don't like it, that's okay, but don't go tell everybody they should kill themselves if they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's whiskey every whiskey appeals to someone. And if you had any idea how much time, energy, effort, and resources were put into creating every single product, like, it would give you a little bit more empathy to go, all right, well, maybe this isn't for me, but I don't have to trash it. And that's kind of been my journey, although it's never been my style to trash things. The only thing I really talk real bad about are like really popular high age brands that, like, I'm not gonna hurt them.
Like Basil Hayden?
No, well, Basil Hayden's not high age, and
Well, they have a 10-year.
Well, and I like it just fine.
Yeah.
But I hate Pappy 20 and 23.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't hesitate to say, like, Pappy and 20 and 23 is legitimately bad bourbon. Right.
It's kind of just a name and just like, oh, look, I have one on the shelf at that point. Really.
No, the real problem with them is that what made those two ages popular was whiskey that was distilled and aged in a different facility than where these releases are coming from. And there was something about those older facilities that made the whiskey taste different at that age than what they're able to produce today. And so as whiskey ages, you lose the things that give the whiskey its character through evaporative loss. And some of that stuff gets filtered out through the charcoal layer in the barrel as the whiskey moves in and out. And so you can age a whiskey long enough that the only thing that's left is the acrid, like, acidic and bitter tannic flavors that come out of the oak. Yeah. And you've lost all of your esters, your fruity esters, all of your aldehydes and all of those things that really make bourbon taste like bourbon. And the reality is that there's a huge pressure that's put on whiskey enthusiasts when they try one of these, like, high level FOMO bottles, fear of missing out, to believe that what they're tasting is what good bourbon tastes like. Yeah. Right. And I have disabused myself of that. Right. Like, I don't care how old a whiskey is. I don't care how much it costs. I feel like I can honestly evaluate it to the point that, like the whiskey that you love, my 12-year, I think I rated it at 82 or at 83. Like, it's a low B. right? It's not complex, but it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes good.
Right? It's easy to drink.
100 proof.
And the price is right, so I try to be, honest and fair even about my own whiskeys. So
Yeah, I think that's the best way because, you don't want to shoot really high and be and I know it's really hard whenever it's like your baby, you want it to be successful. You want it to be good. So I get that part, but yeah, no, it's cool to be honest and, you can get better from there.
It's quality price ratio, right? Like a whiskey can be just meh, but if the price is right, you can still tell people, it's a good idea to buy this, right? Some of the whiskeys that I drink the most of are benchmark foolproof at $22 a bottle. Wild Turkey 101, that's $19.99.
Solid
right?
bottles,
Knob Creek 9-year.
Yeah, that's a great.
Like those are the whiskeys that I drink the most of, and they're not meant to, blow your mind. They're meant to be a solid, consistent, approachable drinker at a good price.
Actually, we did on the last episode or two. I gave Cody just some random little samples, and he drank them. And he ended up, it was a Stag and a Benchmark, and he ended up choosing the Benchmark. He had no idea what he was drinking. The
yeah,
foolproof,
I did.
yeah.
I was shocked.
He picked it over the Stag. I thought it was pretty interesting.
they were,
but it was to prove a point that you don't always have to go for the best or
$100 bottles or the Stags. And
Stag is very good for sure.
Really
I did the same thing to one of my patrons. I gave him Benchmark, E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof, Stag, and GTS in a blind.
That's a tough one.
That's quite a flight.
Yeah, that's a pretty those are some bangers.
And they are all the exact same whiskey at the exact same proof. Well, close.
Yeah, similar.
Just different ages.
Yeah.
And what that taught me was when Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 is young, it has a fruit note that's more for my palate, more in the direction of grape. Mm-hmm. And as it ages, it turns more into dark cherry. But if you like that fruity note, you might pick the Benchmark.
Yeah.
In a blind.
For sure.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
In fact, that's great news.
Because that's cheap. $22, sign me up.
It's super easy for you to get the exact whiskey you love.
Yeah.
100%. Those are good. You kind of jumped ahead. I was going to ask some of your value bourbons. So that was good that you listed. Knob Creek 9. I'm a huge Knob Creek. I like Knob Creek 12 a lot too.
Yeah, Knob Creek 12 is great.
So, Randall, I wanted to ask you, because you do quite a bit of charitable events, right? I wanted to talk through, do you have any charitable events coming up soon, or kind of where you work on? Kind of talk about some of the things events that you support annually.
And kind of why you do them.
Yeah, so there are two main charities that I'm constantly involved in. The first of which was something that I came across actually through Iron Root. I'd gone out to Iron Root to record, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, we're still cleaning up. We had this event." And I was like, "Oh, what was the event?" And they said, "Oh, we did a fundraiser for a local charity." And it piqued my interest because one of the things that you can do to help build community is to host fundraisers.
Yeah.
Right. Because it gives people common cause to get behind.
Yeah.
And we were looking for something to help build community in Someone Say Whiskey, the whiskey club that I'm a part of. And so I asked about it, and it turned out that they provided equine therapy services for disabled children and veterans. But they were like, "Oh, it's like an equine therapy." And I'm like, "What happened to these horses that they need therapy? Jesus Christ." And then I found out, oh, no, the horses do the therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And so I ended up meeting with the owner, and we hit it off, and she was very grateful for any support. And then I had this grand idea, because they're pretty close to the Oklahoma border, to do a Red River Shootout fundraiser. And I have a pretty good relationship with Oklahoma bourbon connoisseurs. And I was like, "Look, all of your people be in my group, all of my people be in your group. We're going to get in, we're going to talk trash. We're going to, we're going to make this fun." And we thought maybe we would raise, $10,000, $15,000. We ended up raising $40,000.
Wow.
And
way above expectations.
yeah,
That's awesome.
And that ended up leading to them being able to build a cover for the riding arena, which was really important because they were having to cancel services so often because of weather in the hot Texas sun.
Yeah.
And so eventually they asked me to join their board of directors, and I did. And then my wife got so involved in helping them build baskets and things for their fundraisers that they added her to the board of directors. And so she and I are both on the board for Divine Equine Therapeutic Riding Center. And, I usually do probably one big fundraiser for them a year, and then we are involved in all of the other things that they're doing. And so this year we've decided to make the Freddie Johnson event a fundraiser for Divine Equine. So Freddie Johnson, who, kind of became famous because of the whiskey documentary Neat, who is a third generation employee at Buffalo Trace. His father helped Elmer T. Lee create the Blanton's brand, and his grandfather served with Albert Blanton in World War II. And so really
It's quite a
interesting
family
story.
history.
Yeah, that's insane.
He's an African American, and he actually, I've had several private conversations with Freddie. I have never not cried. Every time I have a private conversation with this guy, he tells me some story that's like mind blowing. And he did so on the documentary Neat. He shared a story about his brother and his dad. Buffalo Trace does a big event every time they reach 1 million barrels. And so they do this big ceremony where they roll the 1,000,000th barrel into this tiny warehouse that's basically a guard shack, and it ages there, and then they use that barrel for charity. And so Freddie and his father were going to be rolling the barrel into the guard shack, and Julian Van Winkle gave them a bottle of Pappy 20.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the old liquid from Stitzelweller. And so they cracked it open, and Freddie corked it, and his dad said, "Hey, why'd you cork that up?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a nice bottle. We probably should save it." And his dad said, "No, son. You never know when this is your last time to share a pour with someone you love." And so they left the cork out. The three of them finished the bottle, and Freddie's dad and brother died within 6 months.
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah, I remember
And
that
so that was the story he told in Neat, and that's how I got introduced to him. And I've had the opportunity to converse with him privately. One time he told me a story that Buffalo Trace had sent him out to this wealthy individual's house to host a tasting. And after conversating for a little bit, they found out that the individual that he was at that gentleman's house was a descendant of the slave owner that owned Freddie's family that Freddie is descended from.
That's
because
crazy.
Freddie's family line came from a slave owner who impregnated one of his female slaves. And Freddie and this individual were actually related to one another.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah. And so he is everyone's whiskey grandpa.
Yeah.
But he talks an awful lot about the connective power of whiskey. And so I've been trying to get him to come to Dallas to do an event here for at least 5 years. And we were finally able to put everything together, and Buffalo Trace is sending them out. And, I've been dealing with the publicist and all that stuff. But June 27th, 2025, Freddie Johnson will be here in Dallas. The event venue is from Nomad Grills, which is a company that makes these really high-quality portable grills for outdoor living and, that type of thing. It hadn't been announced yet, but the largest Wagyu beef producer in the United States, Snake River Farms, will be donating all of the steak for the event.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And
I love me some Wagyu steak.
yeah, our very own Josh Brace has committed to create all the sides, and he's catered a few of our events, and his food's amazing. So they're bringing the sides. Topo Chico's donating the water.
Yeah, I like Topo Chico.
And so we've got some more announcements coming of other vendors and whatnot that'll be there. But for a $25 donation to Divine Equine, you can come to this event, and you can have a pour with Freddie Johnson. We're going to break up the groups of people into 100 to 150 people at a time. And you're going to file into this room where Freddie is, and he's going to lead you through a tasting. This also has not been announced yet, but we have acquired a Double Eagle Very Rare. And so there's going to be an opportunity to pay $100 to get a half-ounce pour, Double Eagle Very Rare, and to do that in a private tasting of 50 people with Freddie.
I mean, you can't.
Yeah, that's insane.
You can't do that anywhere. Like that's a kind of thing.
Well, the Double Eagle Very Rare in restaurants is normally $200 or more a pour. So
to drink it with Freddie, though.
Yeah, but to drink it with Freddie,
it's a lifetime experience. Cool. It's once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah, and so, I work on things like that. Our whiskey club, Someone Say Whiskey, we raise between $80,000 and $100,000 a year for nonprofits and various causes. We had an event recently. Someone from our leadership team, wife had an emergency medical situation where she had to have a very expensive transplant, and she wasn't going to be able to work for an extended period of time. And so I think we ended up raising $40,000 or $50,000 for their family. And that went through some nonprofits. So we do stuff like that. But the biggest one that I'm most involved with is Live Stay Project. The website is livestayproject.org. And that's kind of the impetus behind me having a podcast and everything I've done in whiskey. If you don't mind, I'd like to close out this episode with the way that I close out my show.
Yeah.
But I'll kind of, let the cat out of the bag. So my story is when I first got into whiskey, it was just for fun. But I did discover that my younger brother, who was a veteran of the Army, he was airborne, and he came out of the Army badly addicted to opioids, and he committed suicide in 2014, which is right about the time that I started to get more interested in whiskey, and he and I had shared that common bond. And so I was looking for a way to kind of positively impact people's lives and help create connection, and I saw whiskey doing that. And so that's a lot of the reason why I got involved in the whiskey enthusiast community. It's a lot of the reason why I started the podcast. And eventually that led to us starting our own 501c3, which is Live Stay Project, which is focused on suicide prevention and intervention. And so we have a lot of resources for individuals on our website. And all of the fundraising efforts, all of the leadership team, the CPA that runs the books and all that stuff, all those people are all part of the whiskey enthusiast world.
Yeah.
And so we probably raise in Bourbon Real Talk community around $50,000 a year for nonprofits, including Live Stay Project, maybe a little more. And in Someone Say Whiskey, maybe like I said, 80 to 100,000, depending on what events we do.
That's awesome.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, to bring people together like that and for a good cause, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, that's why, we want to build our community part, and like, hopefully, we'll be involved in some of this stuff that you guys have going on and be supportive, whether it's financial, whatever we can do to help support. That's a great cause. So yeah, I mean, you're doing some great work, so you should be very proud of that stuff.
It's honestly what keeps me going. There are people out there, somebody like did a reaction video to one of my videos and like tried to make it sound like I was doing this because I'm greedy and I'm making all this money. I'm going to make $25,000 a year working 40 hours a week on this podcast.
Yeah.
That includes all merch. That includes Patreon. That includes everything, right? I'll make $25,000 working 40 hours a week, but I will, during that time, probably raise $150,000 for charity.
Yep.
And the podcast is not how I pay my bills.
Yep.
So it's worth it for me to make that sacrifice because I have other ways of making money that don't take up 100% of my time. And so I really do it for the community. So I notice we're all empty. Can I pour y'all something special from the Prideful Goat?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So in front of us, we have 3 different samples. The 12-year Canadian rye whiskey that you have enjoyed. These were the bottles that I used to blend. And so this is... So there were 3 different finishing barrels. So the story was we got cask strength Canadian rye from Alberta. When it was 7 years old, it was light in color. And I said, hey, you're going to have to rebarrel this, give it some color, intensify the flavors. And this was when Carlos and I just first met.
Which I'm sure Texas helps a lot.
Oh, yeah. And so he rebarreled it in ex-Tennessee whiskey barrels.
Okay.
And some of his own barrels from Giant Texas Bourbon, and then a little bit of MGP rye. So it's 70, 25, 5. And so this is the lowest percentage of the blend. This is a single barrel of the 12-year Canadian that was aged in an MGP rye barrel. So this represents 5% of the blend of what you're tasting on the shelves.
It's got a nice smell to it.
Yeah.
Oh, and these are cask strength. What's on the shelf is 100 proof.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. These are all cast strings.
Oh, man. Very sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super sweet. Wow. That's really sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, we can prove it down a bit, and it still has a good bit of flavor.
Yeah.
What was the decision to proof it down, just to get more out there? Or you spent like 100?
I was trying to get below $50.
Okay.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
when you add water to the bottle, it's free. So it lowers your cost basis. So basically in whiskey or in spirits in general, you take whatever your component costs are and you're trying to make at least 35 margin points. And so there's a lot of confusion in the industry about the difference between margin and markup. Margin or markup is when you take your cost and you multiply by 1.35. That's markup. Margin is when you take your cost and divide by 0.65. And if you get your calculator out, you'll determine real quickly that those are 2 totally different numbers. So one is adding a percentage of your cost on top to cut as your profit margin. The other is calculating what percentage of your sales price is your profit margin, and that's margin. And so if you lower your component costs on a bottle, then you can get it to market at a lower price. And then it gets marked up at the wholesale level, usually 30 margin points. And then it gets marked up at the retail level, usually 30 margin points. There are very obvious exceptions in that scenario, but for a small brand, that's usually about what you're going to be facing. And so if you do the math on that, the person who makes the least number of dollars as gross profit is the producer, followed by the wholesaler, and the retailer makes the most.
It's pretty wild how that happens.
Yeah. That is insane.
Do you have any insight? Because I've always been curious. Because like you can buy something at like Costco for this amount, but when you actually go to the distillery, I feel like it's more. Is it? And I know in Oklahoma they have to buy it back from their distributors.
Yeah, which is
kind of the
insane.
same thing in Texas.
That's not why. Well, one, in Texas, no. In Texas, we do have direct-to-consumer sales at the distillery, where the distillery, and so any state that's set up this way, you help the distillery quite a bit, because if you bought a $100 bottle from your local liquor store, chances are the distillery is making about $45 of that. But if you buy that same bottle at the distillery for $100, they get all $100. And so that's a huge deal. In fact, whiskey tourism if it didn't exist, most of the brands in Texas wouldn't exist, because that's such an important financial component of the way that they run their businesses. But the reason why when you go to Costco, things are cheaper is because there's two reasons. One, they're not paying the same price as your local independent liquor store, because in some states like Texas, there are some states where everybody has to pay the same price. It doesn't matter who they are. Mm-hmm. Okay. But in some states, it's up to the wholesaler to work out pricing based on volume. And if you're Costco, you can do a multi-state deal. And you can go, okay, I know that you normally charge 30 margin points on this brand, but we're going to, buy 10,000 cases and spread it across all of these different states. And since it's going to be one fell swoop for you, it's just a pass through. We want you to knock your price back to 10 margin points. And they go, well, the producer has the bottles. Mm-hmm. We don't really have to do anything except for logistics. They're not even going to stay in our warehouse. It's going to come in and go right back out. Yeah, I'll give you 10 margin points or 15 or whatever the negotiation is. Mm-hmm. And so Costco gets it for cheaper in a lot of states than your other liquor stores and especially mom and pop independent stores.
Yeah.
Then Costco operates at lower profit margins than independent liquor stores, because they are in some instances using their liquor prices to bring people in so that they'll buy that steak and they'll buy that, industrial sized tub of mayonnaise or whatever it is that they're there to buy, right? And so they operate off of much lower margins. So when you lower the margin at those two tiers, you can get things for cheaper at Costco, and you're going to getting a good deal, but they're still making more margin than they would if they sold that same amount of clothing or that same amount in food, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's why Costco's cheaper.
I guess Costco was a bad example.
No, not necessarily. Going back to this Canadian whiskey, really just get kind of vanilla and rye spice.
It's very
it's all mid palate to me. I didn't get much on the front, and the finish is decent. I mean, it's definitely got some punch to it, but I didn't really get. What do you get, Randall, on it?
I get a little of a blueberry muffin with like some streusel, like that crumbled, sweet stuff on top.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Captain Crunch cereal.
Okay. I can see the grain.
So we're moving on. This is the Ex-Tennessee. This represents the majority of what's in the bottle at stores. This is 70%.
Ah, it smells so good. Look at that barrel char. It's got some good
these
barrel
were
char
pulled straight from the barrel. And you just got the last.
The last of the Mohicans.
Yeah. That's the last of my original barrel sample.
That's some good stuff there.
Yeah. Straight caramel.
I love the nose on this. I just
baking
love smelling
spice.
whiskey a lot.
A little bit of chocolate, maybe.
Oh yeah, there's a little bit of chocolate in there.
I don't know if that's the barrel char, but I get a little chocolate on the end, like a little hint. It's not super prevalent. Let's see what.
I'm not drinking the same thing as y'all because y'all killed the bottle.
We drank it all. Wow,
But that's, like I said, that's 70% of that blend. Yeah, so it's kind of to go back to that discussion earlier. When somebody makes a big deal about their blending, it's like you bought barrels that you didn't taste before you bought them, and you're going to put every single one of those barrels into a bottle and sell it to a consumer. And so don't put too much emphasis on your blending, because when you ask me how long this took, like I had to take into consideration, if I change this blend too much, my ratios are going to be off, and there's going to be all these barrels I can't use.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to get a little licorice, kind of, which is weird to me.
Huh. Yeah,
it's really sweet, though. It's like sweet.
Tasting notes are always interesting. It's always interesting to hear what people
And I didn't have a whole lot. I know you didn't have much left in that bottle, but, I mean, the nose to me did not translate to the palate.
Yeah, so for me, when I got done with this blend, there were 9 barrels I couldn't use in my blends, and so those are going to be offered as single barrels.
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so they'll be able to have this experience.
You have 9 barrels, you said?
Yeah, 9.
Okay, so you're getting about 120, 130 bottles out of each barrel?
No, Even at cash strength, it's like 205.
Oh, wow. Okay.
204.
So it should be quite a bit of it.
Yeah, you got 1,800
Will
bottles.
it be cast strength?
Yeah.
Nice.
Ooh,
Okay,
okay.
single. Yeah, yeah.
You're just going to do like a limited release?
Well, it'll be, key accounts or, if there's a whiskey club that I'm friends with and they want to do a barrel and they have a retail partner that'll pull it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it. I haven't released one yet. I think Flight Crew out of New Orleans is talking about doing one.
What about like Someone Say Whiskey?
I don't do a lot of my brand inside my whiskey club because of the cross-pollination issue.
Yeah.
It's caused problems because, in addition to Someone Say Whiskey, which has about 16,000 members, I also have Bourbon Real Talk Community, which is a Facebook group for the podcast, and it has over 32,000 members. And there are people that are in Someone Say Whiskey. They're like, hey, I'm not here for Randy. I'm not here for Bourbon Real Talk. I'm here for Someone Say Whiskey, and I'm tired of hearing Bourbon Real Talk stuff in here.
Yeah.
And so I don't post a whole lot in there. And once I had my own brand, I kind of made this strategic decision that I wasn't gonna, try to push barrels through that club because the people that are not there for that, I don't want to drive them away. But it sucks though, because with this brand, I can do anything. Like if the entire club wanted to go down to the distillery and pick a barrel, well, not the entire, but everybody, if 300 people wanted to come down to the distillery and pick a barrel, they could.
Yeah.
But I mostly keep that in Bourbon Real Talk Community and kind of keep those lines separate. But yeah, that's kind of my reasoning is I want everybody to be, feel like that's their space too. It's not there for me.
I get it.
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of people in the group that like and love Prideful Goat,
But we'll probably do one for Live Stay Project this year.
Okay,
Cool. Nice.
Be
And
interesting.
so, it'll be similar to the Freddie event. We did that last year. Everybody who wanted to go to Houston could go. We had 64 people that bought a $25 ticket to be part of a tasting team. They picked a single barrel. It was the first time we had ever released a single barrel bourbon that was 8 years old, and then we released it through Bourbon Real Talk Community, and we'll probably do one of these Canadian Ryes this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'd be really cool. So whenever we were talking to you before, you had a really, really cool Jack Daniel's story. And I was hoping that you would maybe share that with us.
I almost shared it earlier, but I'm like, God, you're talking so much.
It's
that's
good.
what,
He's been excited to get that on the podcast.
Yeah, so you talk about when I went there and they made me a Squire?
Maybe. There was a lot of different Jack Daniels.
Yeah, I have a number.
He has several.
Give me a hint so I know which direction
I think
go.
was it something to do with the caves?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's the cave in that photo right there.
No, that was really, I don't know, just, cool.
All right.
The Squire, let's do that.
Yeah, so Jack Daniel's is a really interesting distillery. It was started in 1866, although there are some people who dispute that, but that's the official statement, 1866. Jack Daniel's, his father was a Scottish immigrant who came to the United States. His mother didn't make it. When his father got here, he remarried. The stepmom was not a huge fan of Jack Daniel's, and he was, I think, 5 or 6 when his father left to go fight for the South in the Civil War. And his father perished while fighting. His stepmom did not want him. And so he was placed as a ward underneath a local Baptist minister who, as many Baptist ministers had to do back then, was also a farmer. And the farmer didn't feel super comfortable owning slaves, but it was necessary for being a farmer back in those days. And so somehow he was able to justify his usage of slaves by renting somebody else's slave. And one of the slaves that he rented was named Uncle Nearest Green. And Uncle Nearest was responsible for the still house, because as many Baptist preachers who were farmers back then, they had to make their corn into whiskey. Because whiskey was perishable and they didn't have modern refrigeration and preservative techniques, and there was no way to get the corn to the major areas, and so you needed to convert it into something that was stable. And they figured out if you made it into whiskey, you could increase its value and transport it and sell it. So Uncle Nearest was in charge of the still, and Jack Daniels, as I think a 6-year-old boy, was placed under Uncle Nearest's guidance. Uncle Nearest had a 6-year-old boy as well, whose name was George Green. And so Jack Daniels grew up under the tutelage of an African-American, and his best friend was his mentor's son. And that was all very out of the ordinary for Tennessee in the late 1800s. And so he ended up leaving at some point and starting the Jack Daniels distillery. George Green left with him. There's this really famous picture of Jack Daniels that you can see at the distillery, where they took a photo of everybody who worked at the distillery, and there's like, I don't know, a dozen people, and they're all white men. And there's two interesting things about the photo. One, everyone's sitting except for Jack Daniels, because I think he was about 5'2". So he wanted to appear as big as everyone else, so he staged it, so he was the only one standing. And the other interesting thing is that to the right hand of Jack Daniels is the only black man that's in the photo, and that would have been very out of the ordinary for the time, to put a black man at your right hand. But it was his best friend, George Green, and for a long time nobody knew who that individual was or why that photo was taken that way. And eventually historians discovered the story about Jack Daniels' early life and his relationship with George Green, and that became the impetus for Fawn Weaver raising capital to start the Uncle Nearest brand, because she is a descendant of Uncle Nearest and George Green. And Jack Daniels came back and kind of rewrote their history and named George Green as the first master distiller of Jack Daniels, because he had kind of been removed from their history. Lynn Motlow was Jack Daniels' nephew, and Jack Daniels never married and died without an heir. He died because he was a hot-tempered gentleman, and one day he could not get his safe open, and he kicked it out of anger, broke his toe, got a blood infection, and died from the blood infection 2 years later. You can still see that safe when you go on the tour.
That's crazy.
The other thing you can see when you're on their tour is their water source. And Jack Daniels distillery backs up to a mountain or a hill, and there's a cave that comes out of the side of this hill. And when you walk up in the cave, you can kind of be a little bit up underneath it. They'll tell you that they draw their water from up into the cave where a fresh spring comes up. And that's supposed to be the source of all of the amazing nutrients that make the yeast happy during the fermentation process. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that there is a little bit of smoke stain that's on the top of the cave. And that's because when George and Jack first started distilling, they're still up right there at the entrance of the cave. Oh, wow. And it was a wood-fired still. And so there was literal smoke that was rolling up, and you can still see the black smoke stain on the top of the cave to this day.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So that's kind of the story behind the distillery and kind of the history. Jack Daniels died with no heirs. Prohibition hit Tennessee in 1909, 10 years before it hit the rest of the country, because they had a state prohibition. And Lynn Motlow was the owner of the distillery at that point, and he got into a quarry business and orchards or something else. And then when Prohibition ended, he resurrected the brand. And a lot of people give Jack Daniels a lot of the credit, but the Jack Daniels distillery wasn't actually a very large distillery at the point that it shut down for Prohibition. Lynn Motlow's the one that made it big. But he was a notorious racist. He erased the history of George Green's involvement in the distillery, and he even at one point murdered someone and blamed a black man for it. And that's all documented.
Wow.
And so, but he ended up partnering with Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra promoted Jack Daniels, and there's a good argument to be made that Jack Daniels wouldn't be what it was today without Frank Sinatra's endorsement.
He was buried with a bottle, right?
Yeah. He filmed a movie in Africa at one point, and everyone on the set got sick from drinking the water, except for Frank Sinatra because he didn't drink water.
He was drinking Jack Daniels. He only drank Jack Daniels.
So kind of an interesting story. And then my story was when my brother came home on leave, and he had gotten married. I actually officiated the wedding. And he came home on leave, and the movie Borat was in movie theaters.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Good success.
How much?
My sister is number 2 prostitute in Kazakhstan.
Exactly.
Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
Is the chairs walking?
And she was like, "You will never get this. You will never get this."
Oh, I get this.
And she get this. Yeah. That movie.
Sorry, I went off on the
No, it's great. It's
Whole
very
segment
nostalgic.
of Borat impressions.
Yeah.
So my brother is home on leave. He finds out that I have started to drink whiskey. He finds out that I like Jack Daniels, which was his drink of choice. His cat's name was Jack Daniels.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so he said, "Hey, let's go out, have a night. We can go watch this funny movie." And so we went out to a bar. We had some Jack Daniels. I brought a flask to the movie theater, which is not legal, but I think we're past the statute of limitations. And we just had a great time. I walked in. I asked the woman behind the counter, "Hey, do y'all have cups for water?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I go, "Can you put ice in the cup but no water?" And she was like, like she knew. And
Naughty
so
boys.
we watched Borat, had the greatest time ever. Left. I was a lightweight. I couldn't handle a couple of drinks back then. And my dad was like, or my brother was like, "I can't take you home to your wife because she's never gonna let you go out with me again." And so I got to get you sobered up. So he's like, "When you're drunk, you go to Waffle House." So he takes me to Waffle House, and he's like, "Look, you can get it smothered covered in chops. You can get this, you can get that." And our waitress walks up, and she goes, "Hello, my name's whatever, Dottie. I'm going to be your server tonight. Forgive me if I'm a little bit slow, but I got run over by a truck last night." And this is my first time
Waffle
to be
House
drunk in public. You know what I mean? And so I look up at her and I look at him and I'm like, "Is this what people drink? This is amazing. Like, this is great." And he goes, "Hey, Dottie, like you just can't walk up and say something like that and not tell a story." And she goes, "Well, when customers run out on their tabs, it comes out of our tips. And this guy ate, and then he ran out to his truck, and I saw he was trying to get away, and I didn't want to pay for it. So I ran out there, and I ran up behind the truck, and I was like, 'Hey, you didn't pay.' And he backed right over me."
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, "Oh, my God, This is the greatest thing ever." And then a midget pimp walked in with 2 full-size hookers.
Only at Waffle House.
Greatest Waffle House
And
story
I turn
ever.
and I look, and there's like literally a little person with like 2 full-size hookers, mini skirts, the whole thing, and like he's dressed up, and I don't know why. It's my first time being drunk in public. I looked at my brother and I said, "Okay, we can fight the midget pimp, but I have to go to the bathroom first." And he's like, "Wait, what? Why would we fight the midget pimp?" And I was like, we have to. I don't know why. Like, it's just, that's how the story ends.
That's how the rules go. It's the
Yeah,
rules of
so
Waffle House.
so I went to the bathroom. I came back. The pimp was gone. I was very mad at my brother. I was like, "Why'd you let him leave?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" You know. So we got out of there, driving home. He puts me on the phone with his wife because he thinks everything I'm saying is hilarious. And I'm like, "Hey, don't run that red light. There's a cop right there. Don't run that red light. Don't run that." And I go, "Hey, Megan, I got to go. We're going to jail." And I hang up the phone. So I get pulled over. I don't know how my brother talks out of the ticket. I get dropped off. It's like one of the greatest nights of my life. So fast forward, my brother does end up committing suicide. And I told that story at his funeral. and everyone laughed and had a good time.
Yeah.
It was very representative of my brother, how he lived, right? Like he was fun loving, but he had his struggles. And so not too long after his passing, cause he died in July, and about October, November, I went to Jack Daniel's and did my first tour there and learned all the things that I just shared with y'all.
Yeah.
And while I was on the tour, I was asking a lot of questions, as you know, a good whiskey nerd does.
Yep.
And the tour guide realized, like, oh, this guy's interest is beyond just like the average person that comes here. So at the end of the tour, he says, hey, you ask a lot of really interesting questions. Like, why are you so interested in Jack Daniel's? And I said, well, you know, I love Jack Daniel's and I'm a big Jack Daniel's fan. I said, but, you know, my brother who served in the military committed suicide a few months ago. And Jack Daniel's was like the thing that connected us, you know. And my greatest memory with my brother was over Jack Daniel's. And I even told the story at the funeral. And the tour guide said, hey, don't go anywhere. Just kind of hang out until everyone leaves. And I said, all right. And then he took me back in this back room and he signed me up to be a Tennessee Squire. And a lot of people don't know this, but Jack Daniel's has kind of a pseudo secret society that once you are a Tennessee Squire, you're an honorary citizen of the state of Tennessee, and you own, with an actual deed, 1 square inch of Jack Daniel's property.
Oh, wow.
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
And you can will it to your family members. And so I'm not sure which Jack Daniel's story I told you, but that's all of them combined in one.
That's great. That's even better
great,
than I
yeah.
think you remember me telling me. That's awesome.
awesome.
That's so cool. What was going through your head when they made you a squire? Like, that's insane. That's so cool.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And they... Now the Lim Motlow's house, which is the big white house that's in the front, down by the parking area, and the visitor center's like in the back, and the distillery's kind of off to the left. But when you pull up, it's the first thing you see. That's the Squire house now. You're not supposed to go in there unless you're a Squire. But back then there was just a room. And so we go in there and he's explaining it to me. He's like, you're going to get a deed. You're going to be part owner of Jack Daniel's. And there's this guy that's sitting there in overalls, and he's got this thick ass Tennessee accent, and I can't understand a fucking word this dude is saying.
I can't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
It's like the assistant coach from Waterboy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like that.
You want to see
like
homos
that.
naked? What?
Yeah. Wait until how close I came to ending my career as a podcaster with this story. So I meet this guy, super nice guy. He's like jibber jabbering with me, but I mean, he looks like Tennessee. Like he belongs on a porch in a rocking chair with straw hanging out of his mouth and a skull cap. Like that is the image, you know, big belly, the whole nine.
Yep.
And so I talked with him a little bit and I'm like, huh? You know, I'm not getting it. And I left and I told my wife, I was like, man, there's this guy I can talk country. You know, I grew up in Texas. I said, but I couldn't understand anything this guy's saying. And so fast forward, he ends up retiring. And it turns out there's 2 dudes that sit in the Squire area, and all they do is talk with the Tennessee Squires when they come in. And they both wear overalls, and they're both got big bellies, and it's their job. They greet the Squires when they come in. And so one of them retires, and we go to Jack Daniel's to do a single barrel pick, and our rep had set up for us to eat lunch next door at the restaurant at Miss Mary Bobo's. And Miss Mary Bobo was like Jack Daniel's, I don't know, like aunt or something like that. She lived, she was nuts. Like she was a freaking dynamo. Back when women weren't allowed to do the kinds of things she was doing it.
Yeah.
And she used to feed all of the distillery workers from her restaurant that's next door. And now there's this long waiting list to get into Miss Mary Bobo's, and all the food is like, it was like your grandmother cooked it, you know? Mm-hmm. It's just this great experience. And so this woman comes in who is related to Miss Mary Bobo, and she's talking with us and saying, "Oh, how'd your pick go?" Blah blah blah. And I started to tell that story about becoming a squire and not being able to understand what her husband was going to say, or what this gentleman was going to say, but I didn't tell it. Not too long after that, I met one of their relatives, Miss Sherry Moore, who used to be the director of distillery operations, and she was working at Uncle Nearest. And I found out that I couldn't understand what he was saying, not because of his accent, but he had a speech impediment.
Oh, okay.
And I almost said to his wife,
yeah, that I can understand. Yeah. Insert shoe in mouth.
right. And I thought about that, and I was like, oh my God, like I would have had to have gone and hid under a rock forever. But no, I've had nothing but great experiences at Jack Daniel's. And I love their products. There's been a handful that I was like, all right, this is overblown. But, again, they're a big enough brand. They can handle the honest criticism.
Oh, for sure.
We get to try yesterday the Jack 14. I thought it was really good. I don't know if we did a side-by-side between that and Russell's 15. I think we picked Russell's 15, but it's really good. And I got the batch for 10-year. I think it's really good. As well. And the 12-year obviously is good.
Batch 3 is great too.
And then we were talking about just the single barrel proofs. I mean, there's some of the best values on the market.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's hard to
Slept
beat
on
those.
for a long time. But I think people have woken up to how good Jack Daniel's can
Especially
be.
that Ryan's insane.
Yeah. So what do you think, gentlemen? You got any more questions, or should we start to wrap it up?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty good. You got anything else?
No, I think we've covered everything we wanted to, and like just full of a lot of stories and knowledge. I'm sure we could sit here and talk all day, but
oh yeah, I'm like the Energizer Bunny. You
No,
just
this is
line me
great.
up and I go.
No, we just want to thank you for being on the podcast. And I know you met with us early on we're still got a long ways to go. We started back in November, so we appreciate, you and what you do for the whiskey community. And I think a lot of people, whether misinterpret, your energy or whatever else, but we do appreciate you. And I wanted to make sure I said that clearly on the podcast. So
I appreciate that, and I want to encourage you, gentlemen, do it for passion. The odds of it ever becoming a source of income that makes a difference in your life are so close to zero.
Yeah,
that you have to be doing it for passion. And also you gotta, and this is hard to do if you're trying to be honest with yourself, but you have to let the haters hate and not take it to heart, while at the same time considering whether or not they have a point, which is difficult to do. But you have to do that. And at some point when somebody gives you negative feedback and it seems unfair, or it hadn't taken into consideration all of the factors that you're aware of, you do have to give yourself permission to let that go, because if you don't, you'll get discouraged and you'll want to quit. Yeah. And you can't quit, because you're not doing it for that person that hates you. Mm-hmm. You're doing it for that person that's looking for connection. You're doing it for that person that's looking for community. And that's really what whiskey is all about. And that's been the hardest part of my journey, is, to be able to read that somebody said that I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm trying to profit off of my brother's suicide, and not get discouraged, and not hate that person, not get angry, and just go, all right, well, I understand why you feel that way, but I'm not going to stop, right? Just because you think that, and you think you've got a good point. And so you have to have a bigger why than money, right? And over time, everything works itself out, and you'll have that positive impact, and you'll have those connections, and you'll create those opportunities. When people ask me why I do it, and I say, well, it's not really profitable. And they go, well, then why do you do it? And I go, well, it's hard to explain, but I was in Kentucky and I got to go into the sensory lab with Brent Elliott, and he let me try a 30-year-old Four Roses. The number of people who've tried 40-year-old Four Roses that don't work at the distillery is pretty close to zero.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience.
Absolutely.
And those types of things, and those connections, and the ways that we can raise money and positively impact people's lives, that's really what makes it all worth it. And so when you keep your focus on the right things, it helps you to move forward and get and do the next right thing, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think that was well put.
So do you mind if I close it out with my positive message?
Take it away.
Absolutely. Go for
We're gonna make you an honorary bourbon nerd.
I'm honored to be an honorary bourbon nerd, and I feel like the title is fitting.
All right, yeah. I mean, anyone who's really into this, whole thing is generally a nerd. We want to know everything about everything to do with bourbon and whiskey, and so.
Yeah, So I shared earlier in the recording that I lost my brother to suicide. That he was an Army veteran, and when he came out of the service, he was badly addicted to opioids, and he was never able to really get his life back on track, and he took his life, and that was part of the reason why I got so interested in whiskey and so interested in getting other people connected to whiskey, because after his funeral, we did a memorial at my mom's house. We had a big bonfire. We blew up fireworks, which, me and my brother's favorite holiday growing up was always 4th of July. I mean, most kids, it's Christmas, but we like to blow stuff up. And we did fireworks, and some people got hurt. There was a motorcycle crash. It was like the perfect memorial for my brother and the way he lived his life. And individuals kept coming up to me and saying, like, hey, your brother's behavior had become more and more unpredictable and erratic, and I couldn't get him around any of my other friends because I didn't know what he was going to do, and I started to pull away, and I started realizing, like, these people were feeling guilt because my brother had started to lose those social connections that keep people bound to this world, and I struggled for a long time to try and find a way to do something that might be impactful to help somebody that would have been in my brother's situation. And it's not lost on me that alcohol is probably not the best for people who are struggling with suicidal ideology. But at the end of the day, especially in the veteran community, many of them are interested in whiskey, and I prefer to fish where the fish are biting. And so, I realized that because whiskey had this tendency to bring people together and open up the potential for the types of conversations that would create the community and connection that my brother was missing, that, maybe I could get people connected to whiskey, and whiskey do the rest of the job and get people connected to each other. And so that's part of the reason why I started my podcast. It's why I started Bourbon Real Talk community. But, as I started trying to help foster connection, I did see kind of the negative underbelly of the whiskey enthusiast world. And there are a lot of people, I generally refer to them as whiskey trolls, that I don't know what's wrong with them. I don't know why they are the way that they are. I don't know if their mom didn't hold them enough when they were a baby. I don't know if she held them too much. But
there's those people in every community.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, they want to bring in negativity. They want to pretend to be superior. They want to make people feel inferior, and all that stuff destroys the purpose of bourbon, which is connection. And so I ended up starting Bourbon Real Talk community to create an environment where that behavior wasn't allowed. But they taught me a second lesson, which was that you've got all these people hating strangers online, like legitimately saying hateful things to strangers online. And it made me realize that if they could show hate to a stranger online, there's nothing that keeps me from showing love to a stranger online. And so I got in the habit of ending every broadcast I do the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. And I appreciate everyone tuning in. Cheers.
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 Cheers to your brother as well. All right. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed that. Anything else before we sign off, Randall? Anything else?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, I'm Cody.
I'm Garrett.
And we are the Bourbon Nerds. Hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll see you next time.
Thank you again, Randall. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
The Bourbon Nerds podcast is hosted and executive produced by Cody Mills and Garrett Welch. The show is produced, mixed, and edited by me, Ethan Adams. The show features original music by Alex Pitts. You can find the Bourbon Nerds on all the major social media platforms. Please follow, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. It really does help the show. Please don't hesitate to send an email or message on social media. We love to hear your thoughts, comments, and bourbon suggestions. The Bourbon Nerds would like to remind the audience to always drink responsibly, know your limits, and never drink and drive. Be sure to check in every Sunday for a brand new episode. Cheers!